That is a great question. So, because I work for the nation's largest law enforcement organization, it's a little bit different than a lot of people's, but my definition would be any technology or new way of doing business that can do one of three things: either increase officer safety, enhance the agency's mission effectiveness, or reduce costs. Now, ideally, if it's the James Bond of innovation, it can meet all three of those at one time. But any one of those elements, if that's there, then there's an innovation worth pursuing. Great question. So I do a lot of networking and a lot of public speaking to explain what our pain points are, what we're looking for, where we need help, and get that message out to people so that we can do that kind of cross-agency or cross-industry collaboration. So it's really important to me that I coordinate with my peers from other federal agencies, and even with some of the larger police departments, state and city police and county police departments, as well as industry. So a lot of that is just talking about, well, what are you doing in terms of innovation? What benefits are you getting out of that? And that's been very, very effective. So I can give you some examples where that's paid off. We were being inundated with technology requests a few years ago. And I said, there's got to be a way to kind of control the craziness. There's too many technologies out there to actually look at all of them. So I looked across the industry. There was actually a best practice, an award-winning best practice from ExxonMobil on how they were doing emerging technology surveillance in a very agile way. So we worked with them. They gave us everything that they were doing, told us the values they were seeing. So it became a very low-risk option to implement. But what was amazing is the only thing I had to change, one of their intake criteria on emerging technology was, does it increase profit? So I said, well, that won't work for us, but I said, does it enhance mission effectiveness? Everything else stayed exactly the same. So I think it's a great example that we can adopt from industry pretty effectively. So that kind of the era of we're so different in the government, it won't work for us. You just have to be a little creative, and it works really, really well. So, like I said, we've got our surveillance program. The other thing we did recently, which is really helping innovation, is we were watching kind of a blending going on in the industry. So the business lines and the IT silos were starting to come together and actually merge on a lot of areas. So looking at that, and there's great value in that, and a lot of innovation was coming out of that. So we actually implemented that in CBP. We now have a mission IT partnership organization that meets regularly. Actually, they want to take on the role of looking at innovation. That's one of their themes they want to focus on. And what's amazing is we have our our 5 primary mission organizations collaborating in the same room with us there, talking about opportunities for innovation across themselves, or from IT helping them across themselves. And it's just marvelous to watch. So I do share, if another federal agency or even a state or local agency says, hey, could you help me with that? Could you share? We're very transparent. Taxpayers paid for it once. I'll give it to any agency that wants it. We have some very high-performing databases from a structured data perspective, but we also have a huge amount of unstructured data. So we're collecting data 24 hours a day, 7 days a week from a large number of sensors along the border, from a large number of video feeds, from radar tracks. All this data is coming in. Today it's going to sector headquarters offices so that it's managed locally, and it's all unstructured. So we were looking at, do we want to try to pull all this data across the wide area network back to Washington to our data center and put it there so we could query it? And I'm saying, whoa, wait a minute. This sounds like a big data analytics capability, and instead of spending all the money to pull the data back, why don't we send the query to where the data is? And so we're actually exploring, we've got a surveillance going on big data right now, exploring that capability, but it should amazingly reduce costs for us versus pulling that data back. Allow the mission and owners to keep the data where they want it while reducing our costs because it runs on commodity, and basically I can add as many blades as I need and actually run massively parallel process queries out in the field. So it's a win-win for everybody. The first thing would be form that mission IT partnership. Start operating in that mode of business, because really the innovation almost comes naturally when you have that environment. The other thing is create a culture of innovation in your agency. And what I mean by that is actually encourage everyone to come forward with ideas that they think are going to, meet enhance mission effectiveness, increase officer safety for us, or reduce costs. And you have to actually know that you're embracing that. Also, expect some of these ideas to fail, and say that's okay. There's no shame in that. In fact, I would argue if we're not failing once in a while, we're not being aggressive enough in our terms of innovation. We're being too cautious. So you have to get that culture out there. Now, the good news is, as we're hiring younger officers and agents, they're very used to operating in that mode, and they want to get involved. They want to help out. So it's a brave new world.
That's awesome.
The other thing I would add is you have to understand that the greater the transformation of any innovation, the greater the cultural resistance. You just have to accept that and plan for it and manage it. If you go in thinking, hey, everybody's obviously going to agree with this, that's not the case. There's always going to be some resistance to change. Just plan for it, schedule for it, and manage it. The last point I would make for other agencies is communicate, communicate, communicate. And that is one of the ways to start managing that cultural resistance. Absolute transparency is necessary. Keep the message going. When somebody out in your field offices actually comes up with a really innovative idea and it works, praise them and put that message out across the widest spectrum you can to encourage other people to say, hey, it's okay. When someone fails, also praise them and put that message out across the field in the largest way you can, because people are like, oh, it is okay to fail. They're not just saying that. And so communications and innovation have to go hand in hand.